ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prussia.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to this fine Monday morning. I'm excited because, I have so many stories, and we've had quite the journey together. So to have my former volleyball coach from Minnesota State University Moorhead on today, we've got a lot of information, and it's great now because I know we're going to be able to touch base with former teammates from, more than 15 years ago, 24 years ago. It's crazy. So today I am joined with Tammy Blake. She was named Coach of the Year in 2000. Not only was she named Coach of the Year, but she had 398 career wins, the most by any coach in history at MSUM. She also had 44% of all of the wins that have been documented in the volleyball history over at MSUM. So, man, she's got a lot of accolades. She's had one heck of a journey, life stories, but I'm just honored to have you on the show today, Tammy.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So always fun to talk with you and to catch up with you. We do have a lot to talk about here, I guess, today. When I thought about it yesterday when you contacted me, I was actually at the lake for a week on vacation when you got a hold of me. And I just thought, yeah, with you, Mariah, it's one of those things where we may not talk every single day, but you're always like in my thoughts. And and when I do catch up, it feels like it was just like yesterday we were talking again, so that's a cool connection to have with someone. So.
Well, it is. And I think too, the fact that you're so relatable, and we have been through a lot of different things, but not just us together, but you in life have had a lot of different ways that the road could have shifted different ways, where you have faced adversity. And the one thing that you did know is to make sure that you're taking one step in front of the other. So from coaching, people just see the person on the scene. They don't see the behind the scenes, what's going on, not just professionally, but personally. Mm-hmm. And it's flipping that dial or flipping that switch when it's like, okay, it's game time or it's practice. We always have to make sure that we're coming in ready to work with the team and help guide them. Now, so what are some of the things that I know that you have faced while you were coaching?
Well, obviously, the first was when my daughter was born. She was, I actually tried to plan my pregnancy around my season, and I thought I was successful with that, and that her due date was December 12th, which was perfect because that's kind of a dead time for volleyball. And unfortunately, she had a mind of her own, and she decided to come October 24th, which is kind of another crazy thing because your son's birthday is the same day, October 24th, right?
It is.
And the other weird thing about that, for people that don't know, is at that time you were like a student assistant, second assistant coach for us. Really, you were the first assistant because at that time, you knew more probably than the other girl that was helping. And anyway, to make a long story short, my daughter was emergency C-section, if you remember, and it was a Wednesday night, and we were leaving on Thursday morning to go to Winona, and obviously I couldn't go.
Right.
And so you had to coach the team, and back then we didn't even have the ability we didn't have the smartphones, we didn't have the TV, where you could watch it on YouTube or streaming services, so I just had to wait for the phone call, to see how you guys did. And you guys were my first children, right? Like, people don't realize that we think of our athletes as our family, and so I felt so guilty about not being able to be there. I'd never missed a game before, not even, and all the time I had been there, I hadn't missed a game. So I felt really, really guilty about it. But at the same time, my daughter was in intensive care. I just had a C-section. I couldn't be there. But you got your first win. So one of those wins is actually your win.
Well, hey, we'll take it. We'll take it underneath your name, Tammy. No, it was, getting that call quickly, it was a quick shift. Okay, mindset, here we're going. This is where we're going to start. This is who's going to go in, and then adjusting. Mm-hmm. But you had set the stage on the precedence of what that looked like, right? So from being an athlete underneath you, knowing the type of mindset and the strategy that you had, it was very easy going in because of the fact of we had great athletes, right?
Yeah.
Former teammates, you had the athletes and bringing them up. So it was definitely great to be able to have a different type of stage coaching, that perspective. But at the same point, in the back of our mind is thinking, okay, how is coach doing? And, you talk about Reagan being early. So was my son. So the fact that our children both have the same birthday, that both of them were early and we both had emergency C-sections, it's crazy on the world, has so many different alignments. But now you've got an unbelievable daughter who has a great mindset. She leads with empathy. And not only that, now she's moving forward in regards to helping others with mental health.
Yep. She graduated this year from North Dakota State with her social work degree. Now she'll be working on her master's in social work degree. She's working for AmeriCorps, and she'll be based out of Moorhead High, helping the homeless children that are over there. And she's educated me a lot on the need in our community for helping those. I didn't realize that we had such a need for that in our community. And so she's really opened my eyes on those things too. I'd also like to make a point for people that don't realize, like when I was a student athlete, I was a volleyball softball player at the University of South Dakota. And I was in your role at South Dakota State my 5th year there because I was, 2-sport athlete, takes a little longer to get through school. And so the head coach there had asked me if I would help. And back then they didn't have full-time assistant coaches. And that was the same at MSUM. We didn't have full-time assistant coaches for a long time. And thus is why you were part of helping and things like that. But so I went on as a student assistant, which was great. And this is probably where I got my start with coaching. Was she was pregnant herself and she had to be on bed rest. And so for the last 3 weeks of the season, I had to take over and coach. I had to do the practices. I had to take the team to the places they had to go. And it's a hard role. Like people don't realize that some of those kids that you were coaching, same with me, were people I had played with. Mm-hmm. And so the only way that was going to be successful is if you had that respect from them as a player, which you did, which I did. And so that made the process work a lot easier, And so I think that people don't realize how hard of a position you were put in that day when you had to be totally responsible for everything, and they had to respect you, but you gained that as a player from them. You did. So
I think a lot of that helped was the fact of being older. So I wasn't young or the same age as the individuals that were playing, is leaving after my freshman year and then coming back a couple years later. Now it was a different perspective where it's like, okay, she's 2, 3, potentially 4 years older than me when coming into that coaching position for those, for that weekend.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm just grateful of the fact that you trusted me in that role where, really, you didn't really have an option for the most part. But at the same point, too, it's got to be scary sitting in, you're trying to take care of yourself. You're trying to take care of your daughter the best that you possibly can. And then you're focusing on your other kids that are on the road. Yeah. So what were some of the things that were going through your mind as you're sitting in that hospital bed?
Yeah. Well, one was just like, how are you guys doing? Because again, it was late at night when this all happened and you guys were leaving first thing in the morning. So I didn't really get a chance. I don't even think I was the one that made the phone call to you. And so I didn't get a chance to talk to anybody, just to ease your minds down. And again, we didn't have cell phones, right? I know that sounds weird, but we didn't. So it wasn't like I could just call you, or text you, it had to be put a quarter in the,
Yep. And the
payphone.
I get what you're saying. Yep.
So I was worried. And of course I'm competitive and I wanted to win, and so I was just waiting for the phone call in the bed. And then the other thing was I wasn't supposed to come back to work for 6 weeks, and we're in the middle of season. And I was like, that ain't happening. And so, but what people don't know either is you still had to keep helping because I was limited because I just had a C-section. So Monday morning I came back to work, and Reagan was in intensive care for I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. She got out. So I couldn't be there 100% of the time. And so if I was just sitting around doing nothing, that was going to drive me crazy. So I came back to work, and you had to still do a lot of the physical part of practice because I couldn't do the physical part. And you did have to help me a lot. I don't know if you really remember, but I do. You had to help a lot with a lot of things because physically I couldn't do that. Mariah, can you pick this up? Mariah, can you do that? Mariah, you got to go hit balls at that girl. I can't do that now. All that kind of stuff. And so, but we managed and we won. That was fun, right? We still won, and I was hobbling around, and I told the team, I remember telling the team I couldn't do a whole lot, and I started like getting competitive again. And one of the players goes, "I think you're okay, coach."
Tammy, looking back, years back, we're looking 24 years. Okay. I'm like, holy smokes. If we talk about not aging yourself, when you gave me a call, was it a month and a half ago? I was like, holy smokes, talk about flashbacks.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what's coming up here in October.
Well, when I made that phone call to Mariah, I was really proud to let her know that her and the team of 2000 is going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame at Minnesota State University Moorhead for that championship year they had in 2000 when they won the conference. And every single player that I talked to, and 2 hours, an hour, there's no less than an hour conversation with everybody. So that was fun. Or texting through, back and forth. So yeah, so Mariah gets to be a Hall of Famer at MSU. I'm so proud of her and the team. So it was a great year. We had a great time.
Well, when you called me, I was excited because the thing is sometimes we get so fast forward in life that we forget where we started and where we've come throughout that. So catching up with teammates, man, do we have stories about that team. We won't bring up one of them, but maybe we will. We'll see. It clearly takes time to make sure that you're building up athletes, right? It's not something that all of a sudden, boom, typically you have a recruitment class that comes in and then all of a sudden, all right, you guys are winning the conference. Let's talk about the years or the build up to get to that point.
Yeah, that kind of, the seniors on that group were really, I would consider my first real recruiting class. When I got to MSUM, you're just trying to figure out the area and recruits and things like that. But that was really my first real recruiting class. I thought, and you were there, you were there when I started.
Because you started in 1995, but that was not your first recruitment year.
No, right. That was the team they were just there, right? Yep. So yeah, you were there, and then you left for a while, and then you decided to come back. And I guess I would like to ask you about that, because that leads into a lot of things for the success of that program and that team. So when you decided to come back, tell me your journey there with that. So now I'm going to be interviewing you.
I was like, hold on, who's the host here? We're flipping roles. Well, what most people don't recognize is my freshman year is the fact of my parents are absolutely unbelievable, right? So they were strict in regards to what we could and could not do. So when I found college, it was like a whole newfound freedom where it's like, hey, all right, I can go out. I don't have a curfew. I can do A, B, C, D, or E. What came into play is the fact of I thought that classes were optional, right? And sometimes when we're freshmen in college, we find different, habits or people that we hang out with that aren't necessarily the most healthy. So, looking at my grades coming back after my freshman year, I was under academic probation. Not too often you come back and say, hey, Mom, I have like a 1.0 grade point average, which is great, right? I look back then at that point, clearly unbelievably embarrassed, but I look at it now and say, okay, well, that was something that I needed in my life to make sure that, hey, this is going to push you to become more, to do better. So after taking a year off, I ended up going back to Moorhead Tech, where I wanted to go into nursing, taking classes there for a couple of years. And what I found is while I was in that industry or moving towards that degree, is I recognized that I don't want to work with sick people. I want to help prevent people from being sick. And at that point, it's like, okay, hey, I was still active. I was still playing in different ways. But then I was like, you know what? I want to get back on the court. I need to be surrounded by that team energy, that positive push. And then that's when I actually had reached out to you. It's like, okay, it's not very often you have an athlete that reaches back college, right? You look at collegiate sports and says, you know what? Hey, coach, I'd like to come back and play. And I remember that phone call. I don't know if you remember that call, because I'd like to hear, what your thoughts were when I gave you a call to say, hey, can I come back? Can I walk on? Can I try out?
Well, obviously, I really liked you as a player. You were a good person. You worked hard. You always did what was right in the gym, so when you called me, I remember thinking, well, I knew you were a good athlete. You hadn't played for a while, so I didn't know. And then fortunately at that time, we had a JV program at the same time. And I said to you, you can try out, you can come be on the JV team, and then we'll just see where that leads. let's start there. So we're very fortunate because had we not had the JV team at the time, I don't know if I would have had that same,
Oh, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No,
Right.
we wouldn't. I probably would have been like, sorry, we were full, So that was my take on it. And then you went and you came, and what did you think after I said that to you?
I was like, well, hey, this is an opportunity, right?
Okay.
So it's like, okay, so now I need to step up. I need to prove myself. So I remember coming into the gym. You had varsity on one court, so we were sharing a gym at that point, and then JV was on the other. So practicing with the JV and kind of, watching to see, okay, what is it like on the other court? What is the competition like? What are they needing? What are the voids while still practicing? And I remember practicing for about an hour and a half, and that's when you pulled me aside and said, okay, Mariah, I think I'd like you to come over here and start practicing. So that doesn't typically happen.
No. And what happened was I would keep looking down at that court because I knew you from your freshman year, and I'd keep looking down there, and then I'd be like, oh man, she's doing well. Oh gosh, we need her up here. And it was your leadership. Obviously you're very physical, you're a very good athlete, but there was your leadership role that I picked up right away. The thing was, I had to talk to those upperclassmen because, hey, I'm going to bring this person in here. So I said to them, listen, she will help us, blah, 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 and had to do some talking there because you know how females can be. They can reject somebody coming into their group if they don't know. And luckily they bought in. And I was just laughing at myself like, oh my gosh, here I am saying, nope, you're going to have to start on the JV. And you weren't even there an hour, probably hour and a half. And now I'm yanking you up here. But obviously that was the right move. We went 15-11 that first year. And that team, needed some leadership. And you provided that. And then obviously a year later, the team grew in their more emotional maturity. And they also grew in their smartness of the game or lack of mistakes. That was one thing that we didn't make a lot of mistakes. And I think that was part of our success. And people have to understand, we didn't play rally scoring back then. We played the side out scoring where we only played to 15. So, that we grew that next year into that. So I think that I made the right decision bringing you up. That was probably, I can't always say I always made the right decisions in other ways of coaching, but
that's in life. When can we say that we're batting 1,000 in regards to our choices? But when you're talking about the team, you're talking about the different ways that everybody, grows and matures. And the thing is, you've got freshmen that come in. All right, where's the emotional intelligence there? Well, they're still trying to find their identity, right? As we all are. I mean, I went through that, and clearly it took me taking a break to come back to say, hey, this isn't the life that I want to lead. I want something more. But at the same point, I think the type of mindset that we had on that team was very strong. It was very, it was like, we want to win. And it's hard to find everybody that is fully vested in regards to getting that win, where we held each other accountable when it came to a mistake, when it came to whatever. But then at the same point, we were also there to make sure that we were the strongest, cheerleader or positive affirmation when somebody was doing a great job, because we had a lot of great athletes, but then we also had different athletes where you're looking at bigger colleges that had, really tall volleyball players with great, also, you look at their verticals, so on and so forth, where we had individuals like, okay, this is the body that I was given, and this is what I'm going to do to achieve the goal for not only myself, but for the team. So that was a huge kudos, because you were able to recognize the strengths and where to place them, but then also be able to recognize, okay, well, we're going to have weak spots. So who's going to fill those weak spots? Because we didn't have the libero either. We had defensive specialists.
Right. There was no libero back then either. Yep. And like you take Amy Weinzero, for example, she comes in, big jumper out of Bottineau, North Dakota. And I put her in the middle, and then I tried her on the outside, and it just wasn't working for success of Amy there. And finally we're like, let's put her on the right side. And everybody looks at right side as like,
you need a block though.
Yeah. And you could run all the quick sets and the play sets over there. Well, that's a whole nother thing with strategy, but she ends up being all conference over there. And I think the thing we did not know going into 2000 how special of a year that was going to be. We went to Chicago for that year. We went 9-0 coming out of there, and everybody at that Chicago Lewis tournament were all coming up to me and saying what a great team we were and how we hardly made any mistakes, and which is true. We didn't make a lot of mistakes, and we are a great defensive team, like just outstanding defensive team. And that's one of the things I would say that I pride my career on, is that my teams are always very good defensively. In 2011, we led the nation in defense, you know? And so really proud of that. That was probably my go-to thing.
When we circle back to the year of 2000, where we were 17-1 in league and then 28-4 overall, what were the components that were needed to reach that level of success?
Well, I think one was experience, people buying in over the summer months to work out and do what they needed to do, just, you know, because volleyball is, you come right, it's like football. You better work out over the summer because you're coming in right away. I also think that we had a lot of depth in that program. We had a few instances where starters were gone for various reasons, and substitutes, you know, that normally don't start had to come in and had to play. And so we had a lot of depth, which I thought helped. If somebody was struggling, we could sub somebody in and they were just as strong as the other person that we had put on the court. I also really honestly, the mindset that you guys had, you know, with it, you were just as competitive as I was with everything. You held, like you said, you held each other accountable, and you just knew how to get things done. And I was going to tell you that when we won, you know, Duluth had beat us, so we were undefeated except for with Duluth, right? And so when we came back and met Duluth on our home court, we had to win that, because if we won that, we would tie them for the conference. And we did that. We beat them in 4, in fact. And then to get into the regionals at that time, the NCAA regionals, they only took 6 teams to the regional tournament. We were done with our play. The only game left in the conference was Northern State to beat Duluth. And we actually needed Northern to beat Duluth if we were going to win the conference outright. We still won it. We would tie with them if they beat Northern. But for us to get into the regionals, we needed Northern to beat Duluth. And to be honest with you, and Lisa Shriver, the head coach at that time, was one of my really good friends. But if you look statistically, it looked like, and you were a betting person and you were doing a wager, Duluth was the top person to win that game. So we go home, we go to bed that night, 6:30 in the morning, I get a phone call from, you know, like you think 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday morning, this is not a good phone call. And I get a phone call to Renee Serrar, and I think it was Liz Weldon and Amy Weinzero. Maybe you were there. I don't even know who was all on that call, but they were screaming in the phone. And so, of course, I think something majorly has happened bad, and I'm getting them to settle down. And I was like, what? Now, what are you saying? And they're like, Northern beat Duluth. And I was like, what? Are you sure Northern beat Duluth? And then they're like, does that mean we're in? Does that mean we're in? I'm like, well, I'm not on the committee, but I know it gives us a good shot at it, you know? And so then I immediately picked up the phone and called Lisa, you know, to see if she was home yet. Again, no cell phones. And she said she just walked in the door. Yes, they had beat Duluth. And I was like, so she technically feels like she's part of our conference championship team. So that was pretty exciting. And then, of course, we got into the regionals, and we were the first, you know, team in MSUM history to Division II to go to the regional tournament, which was pretty special to go to that. So, you know, I think what people understand that it's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of hard work. And we stayed together as a team, which was the biggest thing. You know, we had a lot of seniors on that team, wasn't there? There's 5, I think, of you guys.
There's a lot of seniors too, but you know, a lot of people too don't see that. I mean, we had different things that went down during the season, and especially with females, let's be honest, I'm one, so I can say this. There's a lot of emotions that can go high and low, and different things that can shift. But at the same point, we confronted any concerns that we had behind the scenes, because we knew the ultimate goal was to be successful on the court and to win as a team. So we overcame whatever animosity may or may not have happened during that time frame.
Yes. And so at the National Coaches Convention, we talk about this, is that teams always have a honeymoon stage where everything is nice and happy and all that. And then there comes conflict. Every relationship will have a conflict. where most teams aren't successful is that conflict resolution and how you get over that. And so we did have a good job of doing that. And I think that was a credit to you guys and the maturity on your part, and we did it. I mean, we did have conflicts, and some of those things, what goes on in our team stays in our team. And I will respect that. But our team did that, and they bought into my coaching too, with what I was saying and what I wanted. You guys bought into it. I would say, in the early years of that team, years before that, we had some struggles, but then I think they started to see the success rate. And I think where we really started to believe in ourselves was when we came back from that 9-0 run. And I don't know, somewhere along the line, we were playing North Dakota State at MSUM.
At MSUM, I remember that.
And we had them beat. It was in the 5th set. We were up, and we, unfortunately lost by 2 points. But it was a rocking, it was packed in there. It was rocking. You guys started to see that you could play with, because I think that was kind of the tipping
point.
Yeah,
the tipping point.
And they went to regionals that year too. So that was us, them, and then 4 other teams that went to regionals. So they were a really good team that year as well. We did go on to beat them. I think it was 2006. We went on to beat them at NDSU, and Minnesota State hadn't beat them in 27 years. I did not know that, and so that was a great win for us that night. I was on top of the world, but the behind the scene things, what people didn't know was, I'd lost my husband in 2004 to cancer, but my parents were both going through cancer later on after that. And my dad was great. They got to be there and watch the game. But that night, I went home to my dad puking the whole night from his chemotherapy. So my phone was blowing up, because now we have cell phones. My phone was blowing up, and so excited for our program and our team. And yet then reality hits of what's really important in life, and I'm helping my dad, get to the bathroom while he's throwing up and cleaning up the mess and things like that. So those are the behind the scene things you talk about, Mariah, that people don't realize that are going on when you just watch sports in general, that there's so much more to what's going on.
I think it's very easy for people to judge. And we've really gotten lost in judgment where it's like, okay, so when we look at different behavioral patterns, when we look at different things, or if we have somebody on a pedestal or vice versa, right, below that pedestal, it's very easy to say, okay, well, this was their reaction. This is how it looks, so on and so forth, instead of asking, like, what is the actual story?
Right.
Because there's so much more than a role that we play. But what I can say is this, the way that you coached and the mindset and the mentality, I know that from me personally as a player, you read me very well. And it was the fact of you were very straightforward. And I remember too, first it was a little bit more where it was a softer energy with me. And I remember saying, Tammy, you can be straightforward and blunt with me. I like military style, like give it to me straight. But I also knew that when my errors were coming through, or if I was a person were getting served to and I wasn't passing well, I didn't take it personally when you said, okay, hide Mariah. Right? Because I knew that it wasn't about me at that point. It was about the team. So it's like we all have different games that we perform really, really well. But then we also have times where as athletes, I think that's one missing piece, especially in today's day and age when it comes to athletes, is saying, okay, if I'm not playing well, then somebody else should be coming in to, give them an opportunity. I think that you flowed well to see, okay, mentally this person might be taking themselves out. I need to sub and shift that energy or that momentum so that we can get back and then eventually shift that person back in where they're needed. So, that's a huge kudos to you as a coach, is because everybody has a different mentality on how they can be coached. And I think in that team, in regards to 2000, we had some people that had very strong, like give it to me straight military style, but we also had individuals too that were more the soft or the coddling when you were trying to address something that needed to be changed on the court.
Yeah. And you have to read the room. I mean, you have to read the room. And I did appreciate that about you, because I grew up in a house of boys, and I mean, that's what I was used to. Like, it's going to be straightforward. This is the way it is. So, we could be adaptable. The team could be adaptable. So when couple years before that when Val Wolf came.
I love Val.
I love Val too. And she was a middle out of Beulah, North Dakota, could jump out of the gym, never played a fast-paced game, and so she was still struggling in early season with how to hit a quick set. And I remember telling our setter Jessie, who actually went on to be player of the year in the league. That's a whole story in itself. She's a great setter. I said, you got to set her 2 balls. I said, for right now, she's still learning. She's making a lot of mistakes. We can't afford to lose this game. You got to set her 2 balls. And Jessie looked at me like I was from another planet, but she listened. She followed my directions. We won. We got it worked out with Val that she could run quick sets in the future, and she became a great player for us. But had Jessie not bought in and went away from Val and didn't even bother to set her, we would not have won that game. And so I was thankful that she, listened to me in that respect there. So,
and Val was an animal. So, when you're talking about her footwork and transitioning, it was the fact of, okay, it was like a fawn that was learning how to walk is the best way that I could say it. But she had like the power where she could put the ball down. So like you said, the other individual has to buy in and the reason of why something is getting done. So what did you, or how have you grown as a person through your years of coaching, and how did that bring you to where you're at today?
Well, first of all, I always have the mindset of you're never done learning in this game. This game is ever evolving and changing. And so I always had that mindset that you're never done learning. There's always something new out there, whether it be like for team chemistry, leadership skills, the cohesiveness that you build within a team, those types of things, also with skill development. So I always had that mindset to keep growing. I've obviously maturing. I would say I'm extremely competitive person on the court. And so I had to learn how to channel that, myself within coaching, a program, and then just learning basically how each kid, how do I get like a Mariah Prussia to perform to the best of her ability? How do I get a Kelly, humble to do the best of her ability? So understanding that and learning about that. And then also the thing about coaching is that every time you bring in a new group, there's different dynamics that appear. And so making those adjustments. So learning to be flexible with things, I think is another thing. And then adapting throughout the years, I went through where technology changed, where we didn't have cell phones. We just watched a VHS tape on the bus to having Wi-Fi on the bus to everybody having their own computer, their cell phones. So adjusting to that type of a situation, because technology, social media, all that had come into...
It's a distraction.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. And then what are the rules? Because those rules were never, I didn't know those rules. I didn't know the rule for a cell phone should be, and so understanding those types of things as well, so I don't think you're ever done growing. I think it's just a continuous, journey that you have, and the one thing, your first responsibility when you agree to be on a team is to be a good teammate, and what does that look like? And you need to talk about that. And I think that what I saw was the kids that were successful were good teammates.
Well, they understood their role. And I think that comes too from coaching.
Yes.
When a coach is able to identify with that athlete, this is what we're looking for. This is the role, or giving the appropriate feedback for them to create the change that they want to see. So if they want more playing time, or if they want to play a certain position, what are you willing to sacrifice in regards to time and energy behind the scenes? And I think right now we've become such a shift of, it should just be given. No, nothing in life is given. So if we as coaches or we as parents continue to give our children without them having to put forth work, we're only defeating their responsibility, and we're not helping them grow, because when they get into the real world, it's going to be hard knocks. And we're taking away the ability to cope, but then also the responsibility required to reach success.
Yeah. Val Swanson was the head coach at Ridgewater Community College, and her daughter, Mary Susan Guth, came to play for us. She told Mary right away, Mary, 6'1", athletic. Sam Susan Guth played over at NDSU for the basketball team. But she told Mary, Mary, you probably won't start. Your number one role is to be a good teammate. And she defined that out. I didn't know that they had this conversation. So after timeouts and stuff, Mary would be the one bringing the water bottles over to the kids. Mary would be the one handing a towel to somebody. Mary was a giver. She gave to her teammates. And she became one of the fan favorites. And then she obviously went on to be a starter for us, and she was a very successful player at MSUM. And so her and I have had those conversations afterwards, and I thought that was a great thing. Her mom prepared her ahead of time.
Mentally.
Don't expect to start. This is your role. This is what you're going to do. And she bought in, and she was, happy to be there. So
I think too, when you transition from high school, and let's just say you're the key player, the standout, what most kids don't recognize is when you transition from high school into college, now you're starting on the bottom because you have other people who are now standing out that are older than you. And now you have to earn your way up again, which sometimes can mentally break an athlete who hasn't been prepared for that. But for you now moving forward, clearly retired now from coaching, what are you currently doing now, Tammy?
Yeah, so I retired, it's a lot, whatever, we can go into that story, but I retired, I hit this 25 years there. That's a lot. It's time to hand over the reins to Carrie Thompson, and she will do a great job there. I love her. I consider her a close and personal friend, but I still involved, a little bit, I call them my little side hustles. So I work for Pace Setter. They are a basketball, volleyball, organization that does camps. So I help them find camps or coaches for their volleyball camps, their basketball camps. I also can go out and do their camps for them. So I do that. I do personal lessons, which I really, really find a lot of enjoyment in those two things that I'm doing because it's really teaching the game. And I love that. Jeremy Peschel, he runs a company called Scoreboard Fundraising, and he's brought me on to help him with that fundraising needs of, and I was on that side of it where I needed the help with, fundraising to get extra dollars for our program. And so it's been fun to be on that other side to help coaches and take that workload off of them and help them be able to get some money raised for their programs because there's a need for that. So I do all those I call them my little side hustles, but I really, really enjoy it. And I'm still visiting with coaches and teaching the game and working with the youth. And so it's been fun.
I think you can never really take the passion out of a person, but sometimes the roles just shift. So it's like you're still actively involved coaching as an athlete, right? Doing different pieces of the puzzle. So, for me, I know the instrumental piece that you had in my life and my journey in regards to leading to where I am today, and growth never stops. So I just want to thank you personally for not only being my coach, but being my friend.
Oh, thank you.
So I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your passion, because that's really what life is all about is, hey, how can we help one another become our strongest self? So thank you so much, Tammy, for coming on today.
Thank you. And I just have to say one quick thing, Mariah, is that it's been fun for me because I didn't have Reagan. I didn't have a daughter at the time when I started coaching at MSUM, and to watch your growth, and I've seen the struggles that you've gone through, and I just want you to know how proud I am of you. It's like, now I'm going to start crying because So
well, you know
really
what?
proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. So
Yeah.
you guys, life is all about defining that fight, whatever that looks like in your life, whether it's personally or professionally, but just know that it is your fight to win, but you have to do the work. If you are looking at more in regards to empowering youth to lead from within, please check out definethefight.org, which is our nonprofit organization to help youth. So today, go out there, knock out the day, define the fight, win the fight, and I look forward to seeing you here next week.